นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. This is a phrase from the Dhammapada that we often quote when teaching meditation. Attahi atano nato. Make yourself a refuge to yourself. One should learn to rely on oneself. There's a few different ways you can translate it. Ajahn Kalyano would often quote this phrase. He'd also then go on to ask somebody, whoever was with him, do you know yourself yet? This brings up many answers, because when you ask yourself, or someone else asks you, do you know yourself? What does that mean? Because everyone has ideas of themselves, memories, perceptions about themselves. We identify with different things as self, don't we? As a human, some people are really heavy on the body, particularly how we look physically. Everyone will identify with the body in one way or another, but particularly the way it looks. But then feelings, pleasure and pain, we identify with them as self. Perceptions associated with all kinds of things we identify with as self. Thought formations, sankhara, we identify as self, me, mine, myself. That's why we have so much trouble when we meditate, because we identify with every single thought that arises, because the unenlightened mind just does that. Good thoughts, bad thoughts, random thoughts, important thoughts, unimportant thoughts, every thought. As soon as you identify with it, it becomes a problem in one way or another. And then sense consciousness, seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching. We also identify with that as self. So the undeveloped, unenlightened mind identifies with these 5 areas, 5 khandhas as self. But much of the time we're just working on the level of ideas, memories. So self is sort of how we think about ourselves, or the ideas we hold, the views we hold about what we call myself. But Ajahn Kalyano was saying, do you know yourself? To encourage us to investigate more deeply. And that's why we come to meditate and develop mindfulness and then wise reflection. Because maybe what we take to be self is not what we think it is. Particularly when we suffer in one way or another. We're not happy, we're not peaceful, we have physical pain, mental pain, anguish. The sense of self seems to come up very strongly, and we identify with that suffering, that pain, the feeling, the thoughts associated with it, the emotions. the more we suffer, the stronger the sense of self tends to become. The other day I was in a meeting with a lot of senior monks, and at one point somebody was expressing surprise about something. Maybe they're betraying their Christian upbringing or non-Buddhist background, because when they expressed surprise they said, "My God," which Buddhist monks we often laugh at, because of course if you're practicing Buddhism you're sort of setting aside the question of God. Doesn't mean to say there isn't a God, but it's not really the relevant question, because you're coming back to look at the basis of suffering, which is this attachment to self. But it's in our culture, isn't it? Whichever culture you're coming from, Western, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or Asian, particularly sort of Hinduism and other religions and belief systems in Asia as well. It's a normal kind of human thing to do, is to seek some higher, superior force when you're in trouble, when you're suffering. Say, "God help me." Some people it's the gods, so devatas, spirits, help me, and we pray and we ask for help and we make sacrifices to worship in different ways. Sometimes we seek help from other things. So some people have no belief in any religion or anything, so it's the government maybe. Government must help me or should help me. Or sometimes it's just other things. Even Buddhists, when everything's going well, then they practice their dana, keep the sila, meditate. But when things go wrong, then off they go to check what the astrologer says. Either the astrologer or maybe the person who can sell you a spell, black magic spell, what we call dhirachana, vicha, animal practices, or lower practices, such as black magic and spells and potions and things. All kinds of other things that people cling to and go to boost themselves or protect themselves when they're in trouble. But the Buddha encouraged us to go back and make a refuge within what we call ourself, this body and this mind. Actually find out the truth about it. If you think about it, it's a very mature practice. You have to take responsibility for your body, your mind, what you think, what you do, your karma, you could say, rather than farming it out, putting it out to some higher being or other person. You're saying, "Oh, I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, I abide supported by karma, good or evil. I'll be the heir, I'll have to accept the consequences of my actions." So Buddhism is asking a lot, so take responsibility. So that already puts a lot of people off some of the Buddhist teachings, because they'd rather have someone else to believe in or someone else to soothe them or take the problem away. Because in Buddhism we don't deny the importance of, say, Kalyana Mitta, having teachers, Dhamma friends. And if you have the best Kalyana Mitta, noble ones, those who are enlightened or have attained some level of the Noble Eightfold Path and the fruits of enlightenment, well, they're human beings that we can also take refuge in. And we take refuge in the Sangha. But even then, the Buddha encouraged us to go beyond the individual person Because sometimes you can make a mistake. You take refuge in a teacher and they go wrong, or they get deluded. It's more taking refuge in the qualities of Sangha, the noble Sangha. The practice that ennobles the mind, that takes you to Nibbana. You're taking refuge in those qualities and say, well, these qualities I aspire to develop. Qualities of sila, samadhi, panya. There may be individuals who embody those qualities, and they certainly are an important guide to us, but ultimately it's the qualities themselves. We're aspiring to bring them up in our own mind, to emulate them, to develop them. And to do that we need to pay attention, learn from our experience and train this body and mind. One can't just do it by reading a lot of books, say, or hearing a lot of talks, although that may be a good start. In the kind of knowledge that will get you to know yourself, or go beyond what we call the self, is knowledge that comes through training the mind, training the heart. What we call bhavana, maya, panya. The knowledge from bhavana, where the mind is free from the 5 hindrances, which you hear teachers talk about a lot. When you meditate, your aim is to get beyond the 5 hindrances. Sensual desire, ill will, dullness, sloth and torpor, anxiety and restlessness, and skeptical doubt. Because as long as the hindrances are playing on the mind, confusing the mind, clouding the mind, we can't really see the truth of what this self is or what it isn't. Another word for the hindrances, in shorthand we say the action of craving and attachment. It's another way. So you hear a lot about craving, tanha, and attachment, upadana. That's the same thing, it's just talking about it from a different perspective maybe. Craving and attachment stop us from seeing the truth or knowing ourselves. Why can't we know ourselves, know this self? Because we're always following craving, tanha. Why is it hard to meditate? Because craving is always ruling our mind, coming in to mess things up. What does craving do to a human mind? Well, it brings up sense of wanting or not wanting, wanting this and that, usually sense objects, desirable things, a sensual craving for sensuality, but also craving for ideas, based on different perceptions as well, what we think is good and right, and then what we don't like and what we think is wrong. It's also another kind of craving. What stimulates craving? Well, it's always sense contact, isn't it? Seeing. Probably number one, seeing, because you spend so much of your time using your eyes and looking at things, but also hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, the 5 physical senses, and then the mind itself, the 6th sense. Craving is constantly arising with sense contact, liking, disliking, wanting, not wanting. That's what feeds the hindrances, that's what you experience when you meditate. You come to maybe calm the mind by developing mindfulness of breathing or any other meditation object. But it's challenging because the mind doesn't want to settle down on a single object very easily. It wants to follow craving, and craving is always jumping around from different objects through the senses, or even just remembering past sense experience. So much of meditation is based around restraining craving, composing the mind, using different techniques, and particularly cultivating mindfulness and clear comprehension. It can seem like a constant struggle because one moment you're with the breath and the next moment you're looking or remembering about things that you have seen before, if your eyes are closed maybe, or hearing or tasting, smelling, touching, remembering things as stories and dreams. So we also need to put in a lot of effort, to bring up a lot of patient effort to deal with this fact that craving is constantly taking the mind out through the senses, as it were. But when we practice meditation regularly, we train the mind, develop more continuous mindfulness, at least for periods of time maybe, and then there's a chance to see craving subside, go quiet, at least temporarily. So we talk about samadhi, stillness, quietness of mind, where the mind knows, it's alert, it's peaceful, it's happy, but it's not asleep, it's not in a trance, it's just knowing, quite content, knowing itself. And craving has gone temporarily. So when you experience some stillness, quietness of mind, steady mindfulness, and the peace of body and mind that comes with that, they say you're getting a taste of Nibbana. Because it's still temporary, then it's not Nibbana, because you come back and you got craving again. You can get angry again, you can want things again, all kinds of sensual experiences, but at least you've had a taste of the mind that is just knowing itself on the inside. And to really know itself, it has to be quiet, content, happy. Craving implies we're not happy because you're wanting something more. You want more food, more different tastes, more sights, things to see, people to talk to, people to engage with, all the different objects of the senses. When craving is seeking stuff, then it's obviously the mind is not content and happy. It needs more to be happy, as it were. But when you meditate and attain some samadhi, then your mind is happy, quite independent, so you get a taste of atahi atano nato, at least on one level, just being a refuge to yourself, independent of the sensual world. So you'll notice if you really put effort into your meditation, and sometimes you're just with the breath, or just with your recitation of Buddha, or whatever other meditation object you're using, at that time when you absorb into your object, you're aware, but you don't need anything else. You're not worried by any sensations in the body, even painful feelings. You're not bothered by feelings of heat and cold or hunger. You may know those feelings, but they don't bother you because you're just observing them with mindfulness. Or maybe you're going even deeper, you don't even feel your body, just with the mind itself. And the normal kind of moods and emotions that affect us are not coming up when craving goes quiet. You're not getting angry or irritated, you're not getting distracted or confused, not falling asleep. And this is the benefit of experiencing the mind that just knows itself during that period when the mind is calm, due to the presence of mindfulness. Even if you only experience that for a few minutes, a few moments, short period of time, it gives you a very deep insight into something new, a new experience where the mind is independent of the sensual world and the world outside and the normal thoughts and views and opinions and all the stuff that causes us suffering. At least temporarily it goes quiet. So that gives you a new perspective, a new way of looking at things maybe. And it can help you to see things as they are. Because as mindfulness improves, you can investigate, you can pay attention and look at all these different things we take as self. If it's the body, normally we are enamored, in love with our body and the bodies of others. They seem attractive, desirable, and we spend a lot of time clothing them, putting makeup on, making them smell nice. And that develops one perception: oh, this body is beautiful, attractive, desirable. But when you develop more stronger mindfulness, this place of quietness of mind, and you look again, you might say, you take a second look or a closer look, you're looking in a more unbiased way. You notice, well, however much you cover it up, you can't hide the fact the body has its unattractive side. Just as we can put perfume on it, we also have to experience a lot of bad smells with the body. Just as you can decorate it, there's also the ugly parts of the body. Just as you can clean the body, there'll be the times when it's not clean. Especially if you delve under the surface of the skin, it becomes very unattractive very quickly, even quite repulsive. Or food that you eat, when it's on the plate, it smells nice, looks nice, but as soon as it goes in your mouth, it becomes mixed with spittle, and in your stomach, bile. If you're sick, or for some other reason you might vomit. Vomit is one of the most unpleasant things. That's just from your body. So if you investigate the body, it becomes, your perception changes from just automatically seeing it as attractive, desirable, to seeing, well, there's an attractive side, but there's also an unattractive side. Just seeing that can be enough to lead someone, say, to become a monk or a nun. One monk I used to know, Lumpur Sangwan, he became a monk. He was living as a layperson, practicing the Dhamma until he was quite old, but he was married, and unfortunately his wife became sick. And this is maybe 80, 90 years ago. A long time ago, when not much medical help, not much care for the sick in rural Thailand in those days. So his wife became very sick, and he was caring for her. He's going to work to earn a living to keep the family going, but he's also caring for his sick wife, who got so sick. She filled the house, he said, filled the house with this terrible smell, terrible odour. He said, not really much different from a dead corpse. This one of the strongest smells, unpleasant smells a human can have. Smell of a corpse. His wife started to smell like a corpse for a long time before she died. She's still alive, and he was caring for her. He's bathing her, feeding her, looking after her, but she smelled like a corpse. Eventually she did die. So after he died, he had been so overcome with a sense of what we call nibbida, just turning away from the obsession with craving and the attraction to the world, the mind becoming weary and tired of all of that desiring and wanting, based on his experience looking after his wife, that he went and became a monk. Eventually became an enlightened monk. So establishing mindfulness on the body changes perceptions. But you also see perception itself, what we call sanya, changes, doesn't it? It's under the power of insight, mindfulness and insight, perceptions change. You see how impermanent, uncertain, unreliable perceptions are. Not just about the body, but about so many things in life. Things that one day you're saying, this is the basis of my happiness, and then the next day you say, no, it's not. perceptions change, don't they? Like with people, how often you see over time maybe two people become friends. So if you see someone as your friend, the perception is really strong. Oh, I like this person. Maybe there's a sexual element to it, or maybe just friendship. But when you see someone as a friend, you find them agreeable, and they make you feel happy when you think about them, when you meet them, when you talk to them. Things you do together all brings up perceptions that are pleasant, associated with that person, the way they talk, the way they act, things they do, where they go, all that. You tend to associate a lot of pleasant perceptions. But then one day, sometimes you see this, two people fall out, whether it's a couple who split or divorce, or just two friends who fall out for some reason, through jealousy or anguish over something or other, or sometimes just misunderstanding. And those perceptions change. Maybe they just become neutral, so no longer look on each other with affection or friendship. The perception now is just neutral. It's just like, you hear people say it, it's like, oh, I look at them like a stranger, or just another person. They don't mean anything to me. Or also quite common, the new perception is not seeing them as a neutral person, but see them as an enemy or just someone you don't like. So it's like a real swing from liking that person and remembering them and regarding them in a good way, positive way. It goes to disliking them, hating them, not wanting anything to do with them maybe. In terms of perception, that's a complete change of perception. It just shows your perceptions are impermanent and not self. If you are, your perception should be like that all the time, or it should be under your control. You could say we're a collection of changing perceptions, I guess. It's not that there's nothing there, but just perception itself is a bit unreliable. Not really a refuge, is it? If it's going to change that dramatically on you from being very positive to very negative, liking to disliking, or disliking back to liking. Sometimes you see that as well, don't you? People who are together, best friends or partners, then they split, 10 years later, oh, back together. What happened? In terms of perception, you're seeing a sort of like a sliding scale of changing perceptions that the unenlightened mind just identifies with. So actually it's quite a lot of suffering there, isn't it? When you like something, you have to act in one way. When you dislike, you act in another way. And if these perceptions are always changing, it can get quite tiring. That's why the Buddha encouraged us to develop the Brahma-viharas, perception of metta, goodwill. Maybe viewing everyone more like a relative rather than someone you love or hate. Smart people then say, well, sometimes I love my relatives, sometimes I hate them. But the idea is to see, well, someone who's a relative is just like someone you accept for good or for evil, because they're family. But you try and develop that perception to everyone, rather than always dividing people into the ones you like, the ones you don't like. The perception is very unreliable. If you identify with it strongly, then it will almost certainly cause you suffering. How often memories trick us, memories of things we used to like, and then maybe we haven't experienced that thing or engaged with it for a while, a few years, and then you're missing that place or that kind of food or that person, and then 5 years later you say, oh, I should really go back there. how often we say, oh, but it's not the same. And you were happy there once, but not happy there the next time. Things have changed. Your body and mind has changed over a period of years maybe, so the original perception that made you feel attached to that place or that experience changes on you, maybe without realizing. So 5 years later you're saying, oh, it's not the same. You go on holiday or travel somewhere that you once found very pleasant place to be, and then you go back there and you say, oh, it's not the same, don't feel so good here. Perceptions change, they trick us. So perception is mixed with craving. It's not like they're separate things, they're part of the same thing. Feeling and perception arise when we have sense contact. Could be pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling. But also with delusion we take ownership of it. This feeling is me, this perception is me. I like this, I don't like that. It spins out the stories of the mind. As you establish more and more mindfulness and investigate, particularly in light of the three characteristics, impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self, what happens? The way you look at the world and the way you experience the world changes. Maybe see craving, perceptions, feelings as very unreliable, not to be grasped at as self, because they're so unreliable. So it's a way of investigating your experience, both in meditation and just in daily life. You can ask yourself the question, what is this self? Who is this self? Who am I? What am I really? What do I really know? As Ajahn Chah said to the monk, do you really know yourself? Do you know yourself? And maybe I'll leave you with those reflections tonight, and in a moment we'll pay respects to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha.